Today we're here to review the Administration of Justice 1 course guide, which was republished in July of 2019. My name is Dr. Mark Landahl. I'm one of the creators of it, one of the contributors to it, and I wanted to take you through it and see how these things all tie together, and where even we can tie some more even current from last summer. Even now, there's many more things as society has changed, and as we're moving through one of the largest disasters in human history. There's so much more to add, and always is. I wanted to give you a little bit of my background. I am an adjunct professor at Frederick Community College in the Mid-Atlantic Center for Emergency Management. That is my part-time job. My full-time job now is I'm the emergency manager for the city of Rockville, Maryland. Just prior to that, in the last year, I retired as the Homeland Security Commander of the Frederick County Sheriff's Office. So I've got at least that background professionally, but then also if you go far back into my past, I spent 4 years as a middle school social studies teacher in Frederick County Public Schools, and then also I taught for 1 year in North Carolina in public schools. So I still actually hold a Maryland State Department of Education certification for social studies 7 to 12. Teaching is something that's near and dear to my heart, so I enjoyed very much getting to contribute to this. So let's take you through the process and really the context of this as we go through. So here's the cover of the Administration of Justice course guide. And then again, this was created by the Mid-Atlantic Center for Emergency Management at FCC for the Maryland State Department of Education. So this fits in the Maryland Career and Technology Education Human Resource Services Career Cluster. So we look at that career cluster again about public awareness of social problems, and obviously with this, the Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness component, and then the Administration of Justice pathway fit within, as we will see. So the three concentration areas being Homeland Security Sciences, Criminal Justice and Law Enforcement, Information and Communications Technology, with the focus of this being in the Criminal Justice and Law Enforcement component of the Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness pathway. So the Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness program, again, part of that same cluster, but prepares for industry certification in one of the three areas: Homeland Security Sciences, again, Criminal Justice and Law Enforcement, which is our focus today, and Information and Communications Technology. So again, we have public concerns over crime, security, the terrorist threat, dangerous weather events, and emergency response, which, as we record this, we are in the largest disaster in human history with COVID-19, which again, it says occupational trends indicate that employment activity will continue to be robust for a very long time as a result of these continuing things. So this pathway and these programs are more important than ever. So the Criminal Justice Law Enforcement pathway, or the Administration of Justice concentration within the program, provides a broad background of the administration of justice in the United States. So they study, as we'll see, the legal system, the development of the court system, the criminal justice process, and the external forces that impact justice systems, the rights of citizens, and the role of ethics in the administration of justice. So we've talked about these three pathways, just a graphic representation of where administration of justice and this course guide falls in the Foundations of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness program in the Administration of Justice pathway. So the class, again, introduced students to multiple aspects of law enforcement and the criminal justice system. And as we'll see again how all those things come together as we look at the recommended lessons and the components that are here as part of this course guide. So the references are all just recommended in the course. They're just some resources that can be used. We did use a low cost, it's not open access, but a low cost textbook to build some of the components or link some of those components. Those components, of course, could be linked using other resources. We've also, as much as possible, tied in open educational resources throughout the course guide. Now, of course, there's a challenge. I've been teaching in higher ed now for 13 years. Using open educational resources for a good portion of them. It's always a challenge of chasing links or things disappear or URLs change. So there's always that concern and those components that go into there. We tried to pick some very stable and very good credible sources of information to tie into the course. Of course, there's always turns and time to tie in current events and things of that nature, but those things are not necessarily tied into the course guide because they change so rapidly. So also within here, there are some suggested assessment methods and techniques, but again, because of such a difference county to county, there's not specific instruments that are included, just allowed. Some counties have their own assessment materials, and there wasn't a desire to either supersede or suggest other, but just ways that assessment and classroom assessment can be done within the context of the content. So overall, the course is broken into 5 units. So, what we're going to do is dive a little bit deeper into each one of these units. So Unit 1 being an introduction to the law and the criminal justice system. Unit 2 being constitutional law. Unit 3 being the operation of the criminal justice system. Unit 4, impact of political, social, economic, and cultural environments. So important on all of this. And Unit 5, issues in policing. Again, there's a lot of opportunity throughout this to tie in current events, tie in other components that sort of bring these things to life and the opportunity for them to come to life in the classroom with current events. So Unit 1, Introduction to Law and Criminal Justice System. The terminal learning objective is to explain the underlying theory and historical development of laws in the criminal justice system in the United States. So with each of these, I'm going to highlight just a few of the things that are in here, because we would be here for many hours if we went through every single detail throughout the course guide. But each of the course guide includes, and as we go through, we'll pull, in most cases, 2 examples to look at. And here we have 2 lessons to look at, 2 topics to look at. So you can see what is the criminal justice system, identify and describe, the learning objective being identify and describe the role of the components of the U.S. criminal justice system. There are some links here. So of course we tried to use things, again, looking for those as best as we could, credible sources. We have the National Center for Victims of Crime. Very good place to get information from. But again, there's that component of here's how the criminal justice system works with an open educational resource component that goes with it as it would be explained to victims of crime. And then what is the criminal justice system? Again, if we could find things, this being a open access chapter to a text that's available. And then suggested assignments or activities. One of the things I used to teach at the police academy and also do it in the classroom, talk about from when somebody gets arrested, how it could move all the way through the local court system and into the, there were state court systems, but the local system all the way up into the federal and appeal all the way to the Supreme Court as an activity. There's a second lesson in here, history of policing in the U.S., describe the history of policing. There are some components that, again, we try to find things, found another textbook link here, as well as some information, some robust information that was put online by Eastern Kentucky University. So again, we tried to find those things to use as stable, hopefully stable links from credible sources. So a chance for assignment or activities with that is to have a student's presentation on a significant event or occurrence that helped shape policing in the U.S. And through that, again, suggested things along with some, again, links that really provide some content support to those components. So again, not going through each and every one of the lesson topics, but additionally, in Unit 1, there's additional topics and additional resources around social contract theory, around what is the law and the question of that, what is the purpose of law, the types of law as the building blocks of justice. So additional links, additional, in some cases, videos that we could find, things of that nature that would support classroom delivery and meeting of the terminal objectives of the unit. So moving on to Unit 2. Here, this Unit 2 is focused on constitutional law. The learning objectives are to identify the key elements and structures of the legal system under the United States and Maryland constitutions, and to appraise the role of constitutional structures in shaping the operation of the criminal justice system through the application of new laws and reinterpretation of the law through jurisprudence. So examples here, topic being beginning with common law. What is it? Explain the concept of common law. define constitutional law, contrast the concepts of common law and constitutional law, with again links to supporting materials that can be used, and suggested assignment or activities, a class discussion or a quiz on the difference between common and civil law. A second Unit 2 lesson here, case law and criminal justice. This is one of, I pulled some of my, I kind of had some of my own bias in here of the things that I really like to teach that I ended up making sure got in here. But case law and criminal law, looking at landmark cases that affect practice. So in this, looking at the learning objectives of a lesson around here, defining what case law is, and then also analyzing the landmark Supreme Court cases for the impact on criminal justice practice. So again, our linked textbook with a reading example, and then links to Cornell University's law school for texts of recent decisions, some resources from Stanford on from their street law resources. And then this is a much longer list in here, but for example, I grouped them into areas where there's multiple cases. So the examples that are just shown again from much longer list would be Fourth Amendment searches. So an assignment or activity that could be done is to have students individually assign them cases and then have them come together under the topics, where you would have an individual student who had to look and research and find and understand Mapp versus Ohio, another that had to do Terry, and then another one, New Jersey versus TLO, and then you could have the three of them come together to then try and explain their cases to each other, and then look at that as a topic area and have them present together about what are the cases that impact searches. So again, there's a few more cases related to searches there, but that's one way that it could be done to, again, bring students not only to have them do some higher order thinking on their own, but then try and integrate those things together into what it would mean for practice. Other components in Unit 2, again, not going through each one of the lessons, but additional lesson topic areas being the U.S. Constitution, rights of the citizen in the criminal justice process, the development of the U.S. legal system, the federal court system, and state and local court systems. Moving on to Unit 3, Unit 3 focuses on the operation of the criminal justice system. The terminal objectives here being to trace the process of the court system to include trials, hearings, mediation, indictment, and witness examination, compare the various classification of offenses such as crimes against persons, property, and public order and morality. So an example here, lessons topic being trials, hearings, mediation, and indictment. So describe the basic legal procedures for federal and state courts, outline the stages of a criminal case. Again, there's a linked, two linked chapters from the text that was used to build it. Also, we tried to build links to some repositories. Some other states and places have some pretty good repositories of lessons on some components that, again, that you could look at, take, and adapt. And one of them is the state of Texas. So there's a set of lesson plans from the state of Texas's career and technology education component on those things. So we look and say, what can we take best practices and things of that nature. So again, with this, a class discussion or a quiz outlining the stages of a criminal court case. So again, supported by resources that are open educational resources that you can still meet the objectives just using those. Another lesson from Unit 3 about the operation of the criminal justice system would be witness examination. So describe the process used to examine and cross-examine a witness. Again, a number of resources provided, American Bar Association, others that give you some thing to use and some components to use in the classroom to provide as reading material for students, background for yourself as a teacher, and then an assignment or activity related to this would be a student role play of witness examination and cross-examination with a judge if you set that up in the classroom. So again, including some of those assessment activities and those things that are active for students in learning. And engaging and taking information, understanding it, analyzing it, and then applying it to that situation that they are in. So additional lessons and topic areas for Unit 3 are about classroom procedures and the classification of offenses. Unit 4, the impact of political, social, economic, and cultural environments, very important. It also ties into Unit 5. But the learning objectives here being analyzed the various political, social, economic, and cultural forces that affect the administration of justice, assess the legal, structural, and procedural changes to the criminal justice system in response to the 9/11 attacks and the continuing global war on terrorism. We constantly, while we know 9/11, is coming up on a 20-year anniversary, we still see those things, those components, things such as encryption in cell phones, and that continues to be an issue about all kinds of criminal cases. But when it comes to national security cases and things of that nature, referring to how we're still changing from 9/11 and still adapting to technological changes. So, that in and of itself is not a stale concept because it continues to evolve. So an example of Unit 4, again, the impact of the political, social, economic, and cultural environments. A topic area here being influences on the criminal justice system. So the learning objectives identify the major forces that influence the criminal justice system, describe how politics affects the criminal justice system, and review the challenges for the criminal justice system in the next century, which are significant. But we can see that even just from technology. So politics, environmental, societal, technology, all of those things influence the criminal justice system or influence the operation of it. When looking at futures here, you can see one of the first things that is listed is the final report of the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing. That group was pulled together after the civil unrest in Ferguson and other cities and other things of nature, looking at saying, what do we need to do with policing in the criminal justice system in the wake of all of these societal concerns about policing? And so really, obviously, huge component of this as we look at police community relations, and we look really to that final report on the President's Task Force as sort of the roadmap for the future in those police community relations, and also understanding disparities in race, ethnicity, and other impacts from the criminal justice system are very important. So of this, the suggested assignment activities, it could be from any one of those things of looking at what either event or component and what's the impact on the criminal justice system. Could be even the civil unrest in Baltimore. It could be any one of those components. To look at anything historically, prohibition. We have very interesting now the people about rights, and again the shelter-in-place orders of governors and things of that nature, and the protests that have taken place in the wake of that, particularly some of the very core images that came about the protests in Michigan, and what does it mean to be a police officer at that point, and what does it mean when we have that clash between people's rights and those other components that are so important and so critical to understanding this field and how it evolves, and the critical thinking and the ethics and the other things that go along with policing in the 21st century. So also Unit 4, additional lessons, again, U.S. criminal justice and the global war on terrorism, Homeland Security presidential directives and presidential policy directives for Homeland Security, looking at those legal components of how those are put in place and changing those systems. So again, this is about those forces that impact. Again, I focused on policing, but not only that, but what are the pressures on judges? What are the pressures on corrections officers, on probation, parole personnel, and even with COVID-19, some of the debate about nonviolent offenders that were released or people that were close were released, and where's the ethics in people being, if we look and say the amount of cases that are happening in our correctional facilities, can we adequately protect those folks that have been incarcerated when they have, that's obviously a core government responsibility. So there's so many things to discuss in that political, social, economic, and cultural environments. That criminal justice system, again, affected so much by our current disaster, and so much to discuss in those components to sort of bring those things to life and bring those ethical decisions. Is is it ethically right to keep someone in prison during this component if they've done a nonviolent crime? A lot of debate that can happen around those components, and a lot of good learning that can happen as well. Finally, Unit 5, issues in policing. The objectives here being to differentiate between the juvenile system and the adult justice system, appraise the role of ethical decision-making and codes of ethics, analyze the code of ethics involved in the administration of justice, assess the impact of current and emerging issues in criminal justice practice, which we've discussed a few to this point. So one of the examples from the lesson guide being juvenile justice, review the history of juvenile justice in the U.S., describe how the juvenile justice system is different from adult courtrooms, and obviously there's some links about the history of juvenile justice from the American Bar Association, information on our Maryland Department of Juvenile Services, the history of the Maryland Department of Juvenile Services, and the flow chart of what happens to someone when they're charged with a crime as a juvenile, and then key issues again from the American Bar Association about things in there about the school to prison pipeline and how do we disrupt that early on. Understanding that key component of the juvenile justice system is to make sure that it is reformed, to make sure we don't have people that run into the criminal justice system for the remainder of their lives. How do we make sure that if a juvenile ends up in the criminal justice system, that they don't end up that as a pathway for their life? And when do they touch the system? How does that impact it? And also disparities in that component. So, again, suggested assignment activity or classroom activity being, a different class discussion or quiz on the differences between the juvenile court and adult court processes, and big questions around the issue of should juveniles be charged as adults and under what circumstances. A lot of discussion items that can happen around there that are real good higher order thinking opportunities, good chances for debate, and good chances to tie in current events as well. A second example from the lesson guide being ethics and the justice system. So explaining how the concept of ethics relates to the administration of justice, how it's important, and distinguish the importance of code of ethics for individuals that work in the criminal justice system. So with that, we bring in here as a link the International Association of Chiefs of Police Code of Ethics, the importance of ethics in criminal justice. There's some available chapters from textbooks, everyday ethics for criminal justice professionals, examples, and then also there were some videos available that I just checked as we recorded this to make sure that this link was still good, but there's examples of ethical concerns of law enforcement and others caught on video that you could use and look at some of those situations and have the discussion of the ethics around that issue and around that concern. The other lesson in Unit 5 is current issues in criminal justice, and with that there's a very long list of potential topics that can be looked at, everything from gangs to terrorism to other components that can be examined, to, of course, our continuing issues with substances and substance abuse. There are so many things to be discussed here, and a lot of opportunity for learning in that current event realm. So this brings us to the end, having discussed and worked through the entire course guide for Administration of Justice 1. Again, my contact information is there should there be any follow-up questions or any of that we can discuss. But again, the guide is just that, it is a guide that provides some basic resources and some basic suggested assessment activities and classroom activities to support the implementation of this course. So thank you all for joining, and appreciate your time.